Welcome to KSR Datavizon YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to see the top 25 questions that are frequently asked in Power BI interview. Now, based on the feedback of the students, candidates, as well as some of the panelists, what we have observed is there are few questions which are repetitively asked, and we have listed down and we'll be walking you through one by one. So that will be the agenda for this video. To start with, in Power BI, we do have four main topics. One is the transformation layer, one is the presentable layer, and one is very important in terms of the calculations. DAX is a right hand to Power BI, and we also will be seeing Power BI service. So we have divided the set of questions into four parts. So we will walk you through one by one. There is no specific order that will be followed in interview, but whatever questions is coming in each part will be the repetitive questions. To start with, we'll see this Power Query Editor. So this is a very important layer in Power BI reports because this is where you start cleaning your data, start shaping your data, doing all the transformations. So whenever you get a question like what you have done in your project, what was your roles and responsibilities, so slowly they start asking about Power Query Editor. They'll ask you what are the transformations you have used in your project. There are many transformations in Power Query Editor, like you have text transformations, number transformations, date transformations, and along with that you have conditional formatting, conditional changes, conditions you can apply. Those type of things you can do it in your Power Query Editor. So whatever you have worked, whether you have worked joining the tables or you are like appending the data or you're applying some conditions, you're replacing the values, you're changing the data types, all these are called transformations. Just you can say that I worked on text transformations, number transformations, date transformations in Power Query Editor. Now, we all know that Power BI supports 99 data sources, 99 plus data sources. So the frequently asked question is, what type of data sources you have used in your project? Now in the real time, maybe you'll be getting the data from your database. The database could be a SQL server, it could be a Oracle database, it could be a flat files, it could be a JSON files, it could be an XML files, it could be a folder files. So it can come from the share folder. So you just need to name around 3 to 4 for this second question. Now, whenever you're bringing the data to your Power BI, you can either bring it in two ways. One will be the import mode and one will be the direct query mode. Understand that Power BI is an application. It's an app which will have some space where you can store the data. It will have some cache space where you can store the data. When you're trying to bring the data from different sources and you're storing it in your Power BI, that becomes an import mode. So what is the advantage of import mode is the complete data is in your control. You can do whatever you want. You can remove add columns. You can do whatever the transformations. You can write DAG functions. Completely it's in your control. The only disadvantage is going with import mode is sometimes the data will be very huge that cannot be brought into Power BI. That's the only issue. For that, we have an alternative. The alternative is we have something called direct query mode. So what is this direct query mode? Direct query mode is you're trying to access the source tables via a query. Let's say select star from table, select star from view. You try to access the data by giving a reference. In this case, what happens? The data will not be brought into Power BI, but only the reference will be called. In case if you just go and plot any charts, you will not be able to see the data, but directly it will go to the source tables. Maybe it's in a SQL server or it's in MySQL. It will calculate whatever the method you have implemented. It will bring only that calculation and it will be implemented in the charts. You will not be able to see the data in the direct query mode. Only this is useful for referencing the data tables from different sources. Now, what is the advantage of this? Since you're not bringing the copy of the data here, you can connect any huge data. That's the one advantage. So as in then it is also having the cons as well. The cons is some of the time intelligence functions, some of the DAG functions is not working for direct query mode. So either you can go with the import mode or a direct query mode. Both is having pros and cons. Just try to understand what is this pros and cons. Now, in the Power Query editor, you also have Power Pivot, which is responsible for creating the model. The most asked question is, what is the difference between a fact table and a dimension table? In every model, I can say that there is always a two type of tables, and this two type of tables I can say it as one with a complete business data and one is like a lookup data. So complete business information I can call it as a fact table, and I can say whenever you have a lookup tables, for example, every country is given with the ID, every customer is given with ID, those things can be put into one lookup table which acts like a dimension table. And now the follow-up question will be, what type of schemas you have used? So when they ask about the schema, you can talk about the star schema or a snowflake schema. When all the dimension tables is connected to a fact table, which can be resembled in shape of a star, it becomes a star schema. Now, what is snowflake schema? Snowflake schema is again a schema where some of the dimension tables can have another dimension table connected to it, or a fact table can be connected to a dimension table indirectly. This too can be the difference. With respect to optimization, star schema performs better. The joins are simpler. But in case of Snowflake, the joins are a bit complex, and also optimization, if you see, it takes huge time. Now, finally, one question you can expect is, what is the difference between append and merge? Basically, if you want to combine two data sets, it's basically applying a join. Join in SQL is equivalent to merge in Power BI. Whereas if you want to append the data one after the other, just like a union operation, you can go with append. So this is all the questions that will be frequently asked in Power BI interview in terms of Power Query Editor. So if you are aware of this, I think most of you will get similar questions. And again, I'm repeating, your presentation is very important. The way you present the answer, the way I have explained each and every question, follow the same way to get better presentation skills. Now, most of the times they ask questions on Power View, which is basically a normal one. Okay. Oh, what is your experience in building reports? What type of charts you have used? So we do have 30 charts in our default, 30 plus. So we commonly use like column chart, pie chart, donut chart, cards, multi-cards, KPIs, maps we use, waterfall chart, we use marketing data. If you have, you will use funnel chart. So this type of commonly used charts will be there. Rather than explaining, just giving the names, you try to give an example. For example, I had a situation where I wanted to compare year on year. The best chart I used was waterfall chart. I had a situation where I wanted to see the marketing strategies. I used funnel chart. There was some key numbers which I wanted to point it out. I've used cards. And I've also used multi-cards, which will give the multiple value. Explain in this way. This will give you a good impression to the panelist, the way you approach it. And apart from that, you can also start speaking. If you're not speaking, definitely they will ask you a question. What are the custom charts you have used? So there are around 250 plus custom charts. You can go with something like drill down charts is there, histogram is there, infographic charts is there. Then we do have like comparing between the two categories. We have tornado chart is there, and we do have Sankey chart, which is used for comparing categorical with categorical. So this type of charts, if you can say, the panelists will have a good impression that you have worked with the most of the charts. And the most widely asked question is, what is the difference between filters and slicers? So filters is something which is within the tool, where you will not be knowing what filters has been applied. Only a developer knows what type of filters has been applied. There are three types of filters: page level filter, visual level filter, report level filter. If you want to affect only on that visual, you will be using visual level filter. If you want to have all the visuals in the page to be affected, you will be going with a page level filter. Whereas if you go with report level filter, all the pages, the filter will get affected. Whereas slices, it's a very good factor here. What it will do is, it will become a user friendly interaction. It can be displayed on the screen, on the report, and it will make every user understandable, and they can select it and it will get affected. Similar functionality but different use case. Filter can be used only by developers, and if anyone who has to use as an end user, they can't go and operating the filters, they'll not be knowing it. Instead, they can use slices. So slices is a very good user friendly interaction way, where you can try to filter out all the records. And here also you do have page level filter or page level slicer, where you can go with default one. If you want to go with all the page, if you want to apply this slicer, you can go with sync slicer. Sync slicer is an opportunity for you to apply this filter with respect to all the pages. And in fact, one advantage of going with slicer is, you can have selected pages as well. You can have selected pages where your slicer has to work, but in case of filter, that's not possible. And also you have edit interaction, which basically blocks certain visuals in affecting the slicer. So these things, if you can put it in a normal simple sentence formation, that should be more than enough. Coming to bookmarks. Bookmarks is a very important concept. Nowadays, everyone is using bookmarks in all of their projects. So what is exactly happening is, you try to put some visuals into mark. I can say it as, you mark certain visuals and you can use it for enhancing the report. And next follow-up question is, like, how do you make your report dynamic? By making use of bookmarks, by selecting certain visuals, and by also making use of buttons and actions, you can make your report dynamic. You can start making your reports even more dynamic by using these three concepts. So this bookmarks, buttons and actions becomes a very important factor. Nowadays, all the panelists are asking these questions: how do you make your report dynamic? So bookmarks is a added advantage to Power BI. It will mark certain visuals into groups. Now, this is about charts. So usually most of the times they'll ask you what type of chart you will use, what charts you have used in your project. So be specific to this and present it in a neat format. Now, this is the most challenging part. 50% of your questions will come under DAX and Power BI service. So let's see, what is this DAX? So DAX is basically an added advantage to your Power BI. It becomes a right hand to your Power BI. It solves a lot of things by providing calculations. You have a lot of functions. We have around 250 to 300 functions, which will help us to come up with additional information. Now, the first question they'll ask is, what is the difference between a measure and a calculated column? So measure is a generic function which will not stay on the data set. It is just a calculation. If you drag out with any of the visual, the generic function will be applied to any of the visual. That's the purpose of using measure. Well, coming to the calculated column is adding a new column to the data set. That new column will go and sit in the data set, which will utilize your space. Now, there is a purpose where you have to go with measure. There is a purpose you have to go with calculated column. So based on that, you can go with it. But the answer as a panelist, I will be expecting is, the way you use the measure, generic function which can be applied to most of the similar visuals, and calculated column which is a required column for my business. Now, as I said, there are 250 functions available in DAX. So the most commonly asked question is, what are the functions which you have used in project? So we do have filter functions, time intelligence functions, date functions, logical functions, mathematical functions. So all these functions, you can pick 2 or 3 and talk about it. As I said, every time try to give an example. So in the filter functions, you have calculate, calculate table, all except, all selected. Maybe you can select 2 to 3 in this and explain them. Coming to time intelligence function. The time intelligence function, this is a very important set of functions where in most of the reports, they'll ask you what was your previous month sales, previous year sales, and also they may ask you what was last year's sales. So for this, your time intelligence functions becomes a very important factor here. You can solve any type of calculations. And one important point you have to remember is, for most of the time intelligence functions, it is always better that you create your date master. Date master will be very useful and it will make your calculations easier if you're going with time intelligence. So when this question is asked, you can say it as, I've worked with filter functions, time intelligence functions, date functions, mathematical functions, logical functions. Pick out 1 or 2 from each and explain them with an example. This is what as a panelist we will be expecting. And one frequently asked question is, what is the difference between sum and SumX? So both does the same operation, but sum is a aggregated calculated column. Like for example, you have total sales. The sales column is there. You want to find the total sales value. So you can just write sum of sales. Now, what is the condition for applying this? The actual column has to exist. Only then I can apply sum function. And this sum functions now becomes a generic measure that can be dragged onto any visual. Now coming to SumX. SumX is, even though you don't have the existing column, still you can go and apply the calculation row by row by giving an expression that becomes SumX. Now, if they ask this question, you need to give an example. If there is an existing column of sales, I can go and apply sum function. If there is no existing column of sales, still I want to achieve the same functionality, I can go and use SumX. It will be an expression by using any 2 columns. I can write an expression. Now, one more point you need to add is, SumX is a row level context, whereas sum will be the aggregated value. Now coming to summarize. So summarize is a table level function which will give us a new table as per the requirement. If you want to have any group by data, country by sales, customer by sales, and this table or this data could be most repetitive in most of the visuals. Rather than every time going and jumping into the main table, you can create some tables. We have a table functions. You can use the summarize and you can achieve it. Basically, this function used to summarize the data. Now, all and all except, this is also very important. This is a filter function. Whenever you want to calculate the grand total, these 2 functions will be pretty important. So whenever you want to take a filter, and if by default, if you drag it to any visual, the filters context will change. If you don't want to change the filter context, none of the filters should be affected, then you can use all filter. And there are certain conditions that only one set of column or 2 set of columns has to be avoided. In that case, I can go with all except. So we also have a video for all and all except that we have created. You can go through our playlist. You will get a clear picture. That will help you to answer this question. Now, what is the need of date master? That as we discussed, for most of the time intelligence functions, your calculations has to be taken with respect to today's date. For example, today will be the date and you can take last 1 month, last quarter, current physical year. So all this is something which we keep as a reference. By creating the date master, you are telling the system that this is what is the correct date, and based on this today's date, please calculate. So that's the purpose of date master. If you are having lot of time intelligence functions, please use this date master as a table. Now, most of the time intelligence functions will be asked. The one commonly asked question is same period last year. Now, let me give an example. Always you cannot compare your current month with the last month. Example, January month you cannot compare it with December month. December, due to vacation, due to Christmas, due to New Year, maybe the sales are up. In January, maybe it's a fresh year, everyone will not spend money, maybe the sales will be down. So you cannot compare January with December. So what you can do is you can compare the current month, current year January with last year January, or you can compare this year December with last year December. So that gives you the same period last year. You can give a use case comparing, like, what if the sales is behaving every December. So this December I'm comparing with the last year December. You can give a use case and explain them. These are all the frequently asked question in DAX. Now, coming to the last part, this is also the very important part. Most of us will fail in this section. That's because you may have not implemented it real time. So what is this Power BI service? Power BI service is responsible for publishing your report to the service, and you will see lot of restrictions, lot of features there. The first question they'll ask you is, there are pro, premium and normal account. They'll ask you what account you have used. So the best way is you can say that you have worked with pro account, but there are some features which you will be seeing in pro and some features you will be seeing in premium. Premium access will not be given to everyone. There will be one in a team or a two in a team, or even the lead of the team, they can hold it. And with the premium, you can go and schedule the refresh, you can create the data flows, you can do whatever you want in the premium, because that is the highest license you can have it. And we do have a normal account as well as a pro account. So we will again create a video to differentiate it. But for now, remember, this is an important interview question. Now, whenever you're working, a simple example I'll give. What is the difference between your rough notebook and a class book? Rough notebook is something you keep it for a rough hand, and notebook or a class book is something which you maintain in a neat format, because that is something that will be shown to the many people. Similarly, the difference between the my workspace and the workspace is, my workspace is for my personal use. Only I will be able to see all the reports that has been put into the workspace. I will be the only eligible person who can go and see it. When you come for the workspace, workspace is generically for the entire collaboration of the team. Multiple people can go and work, can go and publish the report into one workspace. It's common for everyone. For one project, you can have one or more workspaces where all the team members will go and work. That can be called as workspace. Whereas my workspace, only for me, only I'll be able to see the best use cases for my research. Now, in terms of the roles, right? So we do have a workspace roles, like we have admin, we have contributor, we have member, and we have viewer. So these are the four roles that you have to know it. So admin is a person who can access anything, who can add as many as people as he likes, and he will be having the highest access. Whereas the lowest access is being given to viewer. Viewer will be able to see only the viewing the data. He will not even be able to see the data as well, and he will not be in the position to add anything. Now, coming to the member and a contributor is responsible for trying to contribute to the report. He will be able to add features to the reports, whereas member is almost having a equal role, but he will be one position higher than the contributor. He will be able to add other people, but not the admin. So in this case, the roles has been defined. Try to stick on to a role where you can explain what exactly happens in each role. Now, coming to a very important question, what is RLS? So this row level security is a very important question that will be asked in almost all the interviews. So what exactly we are doing is we are restricting certain records to the users. For example, if you are in India, we restrict your China data. If you are from US, we restrict your India data. So like this, we restrict your data to a certain report. You are not supposed to see other countries. If that is a restriction, we can usually go with row level security. There are two ways you can achieve it. One is a static one is a dynamic one. When I say static, you can just go to the manage rules and you can set up some filters, and you can add the certain people to the certain region, and only those people will be able to access it. Now this is a common one that everyone can do it, but only disadvantages, you need to manually go and add everyone, and also every RLS has to go from the desktop to Power BI service. Directly in Power BI service you cannot do. Now this is a bit hectic process. So we have something called dynamic RLS. So this dynamic RLS is basically, I can say it as, we can use user principal name as a DAG function, which is responsible to capture the system name or a username. Based on that, you will be given access to the reports. Now in this case, once you give this, you can also have an entitlement table, what type of access they need in a separate table. You can map it, and in the Power BI service, you can give access. So when they ask this question, please explain about both static and dynamic. If you just go with static, maybe they assume that you have just read and came. But if you are explaining in a dynamic, they will get that confidence that you also worked on dynamic reporting. Okay. Now, when they ask what is the difference between a report and a dashboard, report is basically that you will be like using for your applications. A report, you can have more than one report. You can have even 3 to 4 reports coming from the different data sources for one project. But overall, we create a one single dashboard. That's the practice we use it. Many reports will be comprised into one dashboard, and we can also put it in this way. Report is interactive, whereas dashboard is basically like a snapshots, which comprises of all the visuals in a tile format, properly arranged in a tile format, that you can tell. So this is very important. They may ask you how many reports you had, how many dashboards you have built. So this is something you can answer it. Now, what is a gateway? So usually what is a gateway? Gateway is responsible for moving your data from on-prem to your services, or from connecting your desktop, your services. You should be having an initial step, that is a gateway. The gateway is the connectivity mode between your data set as well as the service. Now there's two ways. One is a standard and one is a the normal one, personal gateway. So personal gateway is basically only one person can use. It's for personal use, it's for a practice or a research purpose. And the standard gateways are usually the preferred one, where most of your colleagues, whoever is working for a report, will be having access to manage it, and they'll have all the access to change it. Now we all know about Power Query Editor, which is used for the transformation. But the next question is, can you do transformation in services? This is a question that most of you have. Yes, it's possible. And how it is possible? You have something called data flows. By using the data flows in the Power BI services, you can create your data sets. You can reuse the data set which is already been used by different workspace or different data. And also this will help us to transform the data. Whatever the transformations you were doing it in Power Query Editor can be done in Power BI service as well. To what is data flow, you can simply say it as Power Query Editor in Power BI service. Whatever the operations you are doing in Power Query Editor, directly I'm going and do it in Power BI service. That becomes a data flow. So all these questions will be repetitively asked in almost every interview, and you need not answer all the questions. 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 should still clear your interview. Please concentrate on all these questions. uh, get into the deep of this. We have posted many videos on each of the every question. Try to understand in depth and present it in a good way. So these are the top 25 questions that are repetitively asked in every interview. Please keep an eye, and thanks for watching.